Good morning. Hello. Well, it's morning where I am. I don't know when you're watching this or when I'm actually going to get around to uploading it, but I'm having a cup of coffee and I am going through the due diligence framework that was prepared by Jared Krause from buyingonlinebusinesses.com. I came across this gentleman through the Flipping Websites Facebook group that was so helpfully shown to me by another viewer of this page. Thank you so much. And I received a question recently, or a request, I guess, that I prepare a PDF or some sort of lead magnet or just a list of what my due diligence would look like. And not being, someone who's been in this business 5, 10, 20 years, not assuming that I'm the most awesome expert out there. I'm very aware that I'm newer than some people to this, not I know I'm ahead of other people, but I'm not going to assume that I know everything. I mean, there's no question that I know everything. So I went looking to see what other materials were available out there, and Jared Krause's he coaches people to buy and sell online businesses, to run online businesses. I'm not an affiliate. I'm not affiliated with him in any way. He has a podcast, which I think is fairly good, and he's got a website and a business and all the rest. So this isn't me trying to sell this. This is just me going through his due diligence framework, and then let's talk about it. Where would you find out this information? Is this a good framework or not? Hopefully you will learn something if this is new to you, and if not, then I hope you get something. Real quick, before we get going, please do me the favor of hitting the like button, leave a comment or something. The more people who engage with this video raises the likelihood that YouTube will show this to other people. And I always forget this, so I had to come back and add this quick reminder. Thanks out of it. So this is his free lead magnet. If you go to his website and give him your email address, he will email you this. And so I'm just going to skip the information about him. I'm sure he's awesome. There's about 3 pages in this lead magnet, or 3 or 4 pages of questions. He does it rather than like a check the box or ABC, do this, that, or whatever. He sets it up in a series of questions, and you should be able to, I hope, answer these questions by doing your research. And so we're just gonna, I know this may end up being kind of a long video, but we're just gonna talk through this stuff and then show you, hopefully from my understanding and experience, where you could find this information or why it is that he is asking it. Because you may go through this and say, well, why does he care? And I'm not sure that I know the answer to all these questions, but let's go through it. All right, let's do it. First, proof of ownership. What proof do you have for domain ownership? Now, I worry about this less when I'm going through a broker like Empire Flippers or F International or some other business that is listing this online website for sale, because generally you're going to be using some sort of escrow situation. The reason that you want to know that the seller is actually an owner of the website is because they need to be able to have the authority to sell it. They need to have the authority to give it to you, and they need to have the ability to do it. I am imagining that this would happen or be more of a worry when you were doing an off-market, peer-to-peer deal, because there's some amount of trust involved. This is why, escrow.com and some sort of middleman is usually involved. Like, you wouldn't just send money to someone without getting all of your assets. But in general, the deal is dead if they cannot provide you some sort of proof that they are the owner. Now, a lot of times, you might go to whois.com and look up and see if their name or their company that they represent, who they are, is listed in Whois. And now, this can work for you or not, because a lot of people do WhoisGuard or Whois Protection, but this is a free way to go look and see what sort of information is available. It will also tell you how old the domain is. It will tell you when it was created, when it expires. It will give you information potentially about, if it had been sold or transferred or changed. So that can be a good place to go and see if they are the owner. If they have the WhoisGuard on, you could ask them to turn it off. It can take some time for Whois to update, but that can be some sort of proof that you can get that they are actually the owner. You could also request not necessarily admin level access, but some sort of access to their backend, as an author, contributor, subscriber, if it is WordPress. Or a lot of these websites now have the ability for them to add you as the user. You can ask for access to Google Analytics, which they shouldn't have access to unless they are connected up to the website. So, if somebody's trying to scam you, it's going to fall apart pretty quickly if you start asking for not admin level, but user level access to the WordPress or to Google Analytics or to something else that they represent that they have. Because if they're not the owner and they're just trying to scam you out of your money, they're not going to be able to provide that. And so, maybe you don't necessarily come up with concrete proof of ownership, and maybe that isn't a reason for you to say, nah, I'm not into this deal and I'm just going to punt and go. It's just the risk is something that you'll just roll up into as you move forward, and you can deal with that risk. If you don't have any necessarily hard proof of ownership and they can't provide you anything that confirms that they're the owner, then you're definitely going to want to use some sort of escrow service or some sort of middleman. And yes, I know this will cost you money. I mean, it has to cost money. You can't use services like this without costing some money, but think of it as insurance, right? You don't trust these people necessarily. They haven't provided you the information that you need to gain that trust. And so you use a third-party provider to help you secure the deal. So let's go on to traffic. Is this a seasonal website? Now, why do we care? Well, when you're looking at Google Analytics, you shouldn't just be looking at their screenshots that they provide you, but when you go to Google Analytics, you want to be able to explain why traffic might go like this. For me, I like traffic that is as stable as possible, as flat as possible for as long as possible. And so if you see traffic going up and down, that can tell you a lot of things about the site. If there's no explanation for the dips that go up and down as far as seasonality or something trending or the rest, then you have this concern that that traffic is being manipulated by the seller. They're trying to inflate the traffic in some way to make it look like it is more valuable than it is. Or when you take over the site and then you stop doing those things that they are doing, that your traffic will go and you won't have a site that is worth what you paid it for. It can also reflect that the seller may have been investing money in marketing or something that they're not telling you about. And I always find it concerning when somebody is hiding stuff from me in the due diligence sort of process, because I want to know everything. And if they can't explain why the traffic is going up and down, I mean, it doesn't mean that if you see traffic spikes, it does not mean necessarily that there's anything fraudulent going on. But the seller should be able to explain what it is. If there's a giant spike, like I have websites that occasionally have giant spikes, like they go from having traffic around 30 to 40,000 visits a month, and something happens and then they spike to 100 or 200,000 visits in just a couple of days. And this isn't something that I have done specifically. It's because there are certain keywords that are attached to certain pages that when something is updated or something new is released or something comes up out in the world that's associated with this website, people come running to the site to get that information or to get that update. And so it happens. It doesn't mean, again, that fraud is happening, but you want to know what those spikes are about. Now, if this is a seasonal website, for me, I'm totally into content-based websites. But for folks that are doing, any sort of selling, FBA or physical products or e-commerce, drop shipping, or all the rest, you'll know when you have a seasonal website that you'll also have seasonal bumps in revenue. This will be sort of a flag for you to be planning your inventory or planning your resources or planning for these spikes and drops, so that you don't end up in a situation where you have too much demand for the product that you don't have and you end up losing a whole bunch of money. Traffic. I definitely want to know what the average monthly visits are over the last 12 months. Frankly, I'd like to know longer. I'd like to know 24 months. I'd like to have at least 24 months worth of data of where the traffic looks like, where it is coming from. And generally, I want to get access directly to Google Analytics. Anybody who won't give you some sort of user level access to analytics or doesn't have analytics installed on the site, for me, that's a Hands off. I'm not interested in any site that doesn't have analytics. Sometimes you'll come across sites where they didn't install it until, a couple months before they decided to sell it. I don't know. It just makes me not interested in it because I like to have that data. I just want to know, people represent to me, oh, well, it's been doing this, that, or whatever. I don't care. I want to know. I want to see what that traffic has looked like for the last 2 years. And for me, if the site isn't 2 years old, it doesn't mean that I'm not interested in it, that I would just get out of the deal. I wouldn't continue in my due diligence. It would just impact how much money I was willing to offer for it. It just makes it less valuable to me if they don't have at least 2 years worth of data. It's a newer site. It hasn't settled out. Even if the traffic is, like shooting up like a rocket, right? Like that's awesome. That's awesome. That's better than a site where there's, no traffic or, this, that, or whatever, or traffic going down. I mean, I would rather see traffic going up than traffic going down. I will totally agree with that. My favorite is stable, but I want to see the traffic over time. I don't want to know just the average each month. I want to be able to see where the traffic has been, and I'm going to do that by requesting user level access to Google Analytics so I can check for myself. And if they don't have data for the last 12 months, it's going to dramatically impact how much money I'm willing to pay for it. So if you're looking at this thinking, oh, well, maybe I will sell my site next year, and you don't have Google Analytics installed on it, get it. You need to get that installed on there so that there is data for the buyer to take a look at, and it will help stabilize the whole sale process, and help them trust you, and that you are actually right in what you're trying to offer. What is the duration on page? This is less important to me. It's just something to know. More important to me is looking at the various in Google Analytics, looking at the various pages and then looking at what the bounce rate is. When you see something that says 100% bounce rate, it doesn't mean necessarily that the page is bad or that the information is bad. I just know that that's going to be impacting the time on page. The average time on page doesn't bother me that much. The average bounce rate doesn't bother me that much, because if the site is earning and earning really well, then I know that these are numbers that can be improved over time and don't necessarily mean that the site is fraudulent or bad or anything else. I think way too much emphasis is placed upon time on page and the bounce rate. I don't think that these numbers mean quite what you think that they do. I have sites that perform really well that have a really high bounce rate, and I have sites that perform really terribly and don't earn very much, and they have a ridiculously low bounce rate, like under 10%. Which is awesome, but they don't hardly earn anything. So again, I think those numbers are good to know, and it's good to have access to those numbers. And if the seller won't provide you with access to those numbers, it's a flag. So you want to request access to analytics. Again, I keep saying that, but honestly, if you are going into a deal and you're not requesting user level access to analytics, that's a big flag to the seller that you don't know what you're doing, I think. I don't know that everybody would agree with me, but I think most people are requesting user level access to analytics and Search Console, and I don't know if you can get through it through Webmaster Tools or the rest, but again, if you're not asking for those things, that's a flag to them that you may be a beginner, and that may leave them open to try to take advantage of that. Where does the majority of traffic come from and why? Yes, I want to know that. And why does it matter? For me, I'm primarily interested in traffic that's coming through organic search, through Google, Bing, all the search engines, because it means that if I step away from the site for a day, a week, or a month, that traffic should continue to come in. It's based upon what content is on the site. I don't have to do anything to get it. It should be fine. If the traffic is coming from Pinterest or from Facebook or from Instagram or from YouTube, that is not necessarily a flag for me that I don't want to buy the site. It just means that I'm going to have to invest effort or time or money or an employee or a VA or something to maintain that. I mean, it's great that sites are able to generate hundreds of thousands of visits a year from Pinterest. That's awesome. But for me, that is a flag that I will have to continue to do that, to continue to put time and effort into creating pins, into repinning, and that's an expense probably for some sort of Pinterest management tool like Tailwind. to continue to make that traffic happen. Because if I just step away from it, I'm taking over the site, in migration, and that traffic is probably going to fall off a significant amount. And and when you see a lot of traffic coming from social media or from non-organic sources, you also know that that could potentially be manipulated by the seller simply by investing a lot of time in this. So the site can look really great for traffic, and it can mean that the site is really valuable. But for me, I'm not interested in going in and doing a ton of work for to make that traffic happen. I'm interested in a site where I can create content for it, and then I can put it down and walk away to work on other projects. So for me, I'm on a site that is organic versus not. That's going to weigh in one way or another for me as far as what I want to offer for it. Now, I will say that a site that is only traffic is only coming from one source, like from Google, and doesn't have social media at all. One, your site is risking, some sort of decimation as the result of some sort of change. The loss of a specific keyword in. The next question is, what is the likelihood of traffic staying stable, and what work would be required for this to happen? I think that's a great question, and it's one that you'll want to hopefully be able to answer before it is that you make a decision about making an offer on the site. If the traffic is very stable, it's a flat line across, you should know by now, if you have access to analytics, where that traffic is coming from. And if the traffic is coming primarily from organic search, then you know to maintain that level of traffic that you're probably going to need to continue to add content over time on a similar schedule. Because if you don't add content over time, it will stabilize, but then it will slowly go down. That's just naturally what happens. Websites need refreshed new content. They just do. And if your website has diversified sources of traffic, it has Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and the rest, then you know that to maintain that traffic stability, that you are going to have to invest time in Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and the rest to continue to make that happen, or focus on one, throw a lot more resources at content to try and take place of the Pinterest efforts that were being made before. So again, you don't have to necessarily pick one strategy. It doesn't have to be just Google search. It doesn't have to be just Pinterest or just Instagram. You just have to know and have a good understanding of where the traffic is coming from, and have a plan for, if you took over the site, what it is that you would do to continue to make the traffic happen, to make it be stable. Let's see, SEO research. So give a brief history of the website's SEO profile. Gosh, what is the SEO profile? I don't know. I'm not an SEO, so I don't necessarily have a great answer for that. I think maybe we'll just go through the SEO research, and then maybe at the end we'll be able to to say what that means. What is the page rank? What is the domain authority? You can get this information from places like Moz Pro. And the free version of Moz, I think, gives you quite a bit of information, a surprising amount of information. I think a lot of pros who are doing buying and selling of websites use Ahrefs, and it's a paid tool. Ahrefs costs $100 a month for the basic version, and I think close to $300, $200 or $300 for the supreme super awesome version. And I know the folks that are making big money are using and rely pretty heavily on Ahrefs. But Moz, oh, by the way, Ahrefs does have, you can spend some dollars to get 1 week. So if you are looking ahead and thinking, oh, I want to look at this particular site, and or I know that I'm going to make an offer on something in the next couple of days. I want to do due diligence on these things right now. You could pay $7 and get access to all of the information that Ahrefs has. Moz is another one that you can use to look at information about the site and to do due diligence. As far as which one is awesome or not. I've used the free version of Moz just to get some sort of information about what the website SEO profile and the links look like. Is it the best? I mean, I don't know. I just tell you what I'm using. It's better than no information at all. And I don't know if you can afford Ahrefs or want to invest in it. It's a great tool to use. Feel free. But if you're just sort of popping around and just want to get more information and don't necessarily know yet what you're looking at and what you don't, Moz is a great place to go. Just to put in, a website, you get 10 queries a month, or I guess I think 10 searches a month. So you could come in and say, okay, I want to look at these 4 or 5 websites, and for free, you can get access to information on them through, and you go up here to their free SEO tools, and they have a link explorer. I don't know. Anyway, so I put in neilpatel.com because I also put neilpatel.com into the whois. And by the way, his registrant org, the organization, the business that owns his domain is I'm kind of a big deal, which just kind of cracks me up. Anyway, so I put in neilpatel.com, and so if you're interested in knowing, about the domain authority for the site, it tells you. And I have checked this domain across a couple different tools, and I think it's fairly close to what you might find elsewhere. But Moz assigns a domain authority of 87 to neilpatel.com, which is no surprise, but it also gives you the number of linking domains, the inbound links, and ranking keywords. It will tell you sort of the profile in the last month or two of how many links have been gained and lost. And then it will talk to you about page authority. It will give you an idea of how many links are follow versus no follow links, some of the top followed links, top pages on the sites. It will give you the domain authority for number of linking domains, which again is helpful information to have so that you can know more about the site. You will also, and I think there's a neat tool over here, it says the spam score. And when you click on that, what it does is it tells you about the likelihood that the links that you're looking at are spam or bad links. And so if you scroll down, you see they give you the top 50 inbound links, and they'll give you the spam score, and you can look at them and you're like, oh, that clearly looks like spam. And every website is going to have some spam links. That's just going to happen. And I think Neil Patel probably goes out of his way to disavow the bad links, but for him, I mean, I can't imagine that he cares too much, as long as the profile is primarily, domains that have a low spam score. But if you put in your domain and you come over here and look and you see a giant spike in the number of domains that have the spam score in the orange or the red, then maybe that's a flag for you to look more carefully at the linking domains. So how old is the domain name? Again, you can find that out from whois. The older, generally the better. I would like generally to have a website that is old as possible, but at least 2 years old is sort of my interest as far as websites that I want to buy. What is the website's loading speed? There are tons of tools out there that you can use for this. You can also check some of this information through Google Analytics, but there are plenty of page speed checkers that you can check out that you don't have to pay to take a look at. How many great keywords does the site have ranked? Ahrefs does a good job of providing keywords for you for that. You can also request access to Search Console, because Search Console will give you the ranking for the top 1,000 if there are 1,000 keywords. You can also go over to Ubersuggest, which is also free to use, but I don't necessarily trust the data over there as being that great. I think Search Console for me is the place that I would want to go to get data that is most likely to be accurate for my purposes. Good backlinks, bad backlinks. Again, take a look at Moz, the free version of Moz that will tell you a bit about that, but you could also go through and look at the actual backlinks, like click on it and see, and go to the page and see how spammy or scammy it looks. Is that a site that you want to be connected to? Does the site have any duplicate content, and if so, how much? There's a tool that you can use called SiteLiner. There's a free version of SiteLiner and a paid version of SiteLiner. It will give you a scan of a portion of the site to give you a percentage of what the content on there is duplicative, and will also kind of give you a range of whether or not this is has more duplicate content than other sites, which is good to know. If a site has a lot of duplicate content on it but is really ranking well, does that mean that I won't buy the site or I'm not interested in the site? No, it's just something to know. I just want to know if the site is really highly duplicative, like you can tell that the content has been spun or has been created by a spinning tool, and basically everything is just about the same, I'm less likely to want to pay big money for it. But just know that every site is going to have some duplicate content. There's just no way to avoid that. If the site is in a specific niche or niche, however you say that, then duplicate content is not a red flag as long as it's not a super significant high amount, especially if the site is ranking well, in my opinion. Is there any money being spent on SEO currently or in the past? And what results did that produce and how much was spent? That's a question that you're going to want to ask directly of the seller, either over email or through the broker, or on a phone call, and get that information. And then once you have that information, you're going to want to look at the site and see if it matches up. So if they say that they hired an SEO expert to do on-page SEO work, to go and optimize the pages and to do keywords and the rest, like, make sure that matches up. Make sure that it looks like that work was actually done. If they have paid backlinks, you're going to want to look and see, look at those links and look at where they came from, and just make sure that what they're telling you matches up with what it is that the site, what information that you see. Is the site mobile friendly? That's an easy one to check. Just get out your cell phone and go to the site and check and see what it looks like. Has the traffic site been affected by any search algorithm changes? You can ask the seller that directly, or you can look at Google, at the Google Analytics, to look for big spikes or drops that correlate with any known Google updates that you have. And that's also something you can look at Search Console. And again, while you're in Console, you can also look at any sort of coverage issues or de-indexing issues, or you can look for broken links, 404s, 301s, all that information. For me, I'm not a really technical website buyer or seller, but it's just something that I look for. I'm always looking for red flags, and then I can investigate more when I see those. And then, it goes back past SEO to financials and marketing and competitors. For me, before I go on to financials, I'm going to be looking really carefully at the content. I'm going to be looking at, how much content is on the pages. One of the things I will do is just take several of the URLs and go to the web page word counter and just get an idea of how many words are on page. You would be surprised, you look at a page and you think, gosh, there's a lot of content on here, and then you actually count the number of words on page and find out that there's only a couple hundred words, and you're like, huh, I thought that this had more content than it does. But you're just going to want to, look and see, because again, pages, if you have a website that has tons of low content pages, that could leave you vulnerable to Google. And what you could do is get access to the sitemap. If you can't find it on your own, ask the seller for it, for the link to it, and then you can just go through and look at how many posts that there are, and then just go and do an audit of yourself. Just pick some URLs randomly and take a look at them, make sure the content is good, and then also look at the word count just to see how much content there actually is. Now, as far as content quality too, I'm thinking about the user experience, because the user experience is everything when it relates to Google. And so when I click on the blog article, is it a good article? Is it good? Is it in the language that I am speaking or that my audience is speaking? Is it high quality content? Is it spelled correctly? Is the grammar good? Is the formatting good? Does it look good? Are you getting information when you go there? A website that has you saying yes, 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 yes to all those things, to me, is worth more than a site that I can tell, that they're using content creators that the language that they're writing in isn't their first language, that they don't necessarily aren't necessarily focused on getting the user to find what they're looking for. It's over optimized for keywords, keyword stuffed, whatever. I just want to look at the content quality and just come away feeling like this is good content. The user who came here would get their question answered and would have a good experience. And if the answer to that is no, does that mean necessarily that I wouldn't buy it? No, I would just look at it more like a flip, like a fixer-upper. Like this is an opportunity versus something that I would just pay a lot more money for. I would also be looking at the content that's away from the first page for whether or not it would be compatible for whatever monetization strategy I am thinking of working on. So if I am looking at an Amazon affiliate site, right, that has never been monetized with display ads, I'm going to be looking to see if the site could pass the AdSense review. Is there content on the site that violates the AdSense terms of service, like content about binge drinking or about smoking or about gambling, or that just in general I wouldn't be able to put display ads on. And if that's the case, then I either look at it as a fixer-upper or as a site that I will pass on, because for me, in most cases, I'm looking for sites that I can monetize with display advertising, regardless of how it is that they're being monetized currently. I just want to have that as an option. And if it violates the AdSense terms of service, then I am either not going to make an offer on it, or I'm going to make a low offer on it, because to me, it's not as valuable as others. I'm also looking at the content to see if it is evergreen versus trending. If the content is really focused on the newest releases or specific products that will be updated over time, I know that the traffic going to these pages, especially if they are the major traffic drawing pages for the site, is just going to go down over time. And I made the mistake. I'll just own up to it. I bought a site really early on in this my online buying and selling career that I was excited about, that had good traffic, and I didn't look that carefully at the product review pages. And it's my own fault, because I didn't know any better. Now that I do, I see the outcome of that, and the site, the traffic has just gone, ooh. Does that mean that the site can't be made profitable again? No, it just means that I'm going to have to invest time and money, or just my time, or just my money, one of those combinations, to make in content to get the site earning again. If the content is really evergreen, meaning that it's informational, or that it's products that won't be updated, or something that in 2 years from now is still going to be relevant, still going to be getting traffic, that for me is more valuable. I'm more likely to offer money for something like that versus something that is trending. And frankly, the content needs to be something that you maybe are interested in being associated with. If you are planning on hiring writers, you don't necessarily have to know a ton about the content to be able to do that. But I do think that it should be at least a subject matter that you either know about or could get to know about, because it makes it really hard to supervise your content writers and make sure that the content is high quality if you don't know what it is you're talking about. Like if it's tech related tutorials and you don't know anything about it, then it's going to be really hard to say, this is a good article, this should be published, or to be able to research and create the articles yourself. Financials. What proof of the financials have you seen? It's really important to have as much information about the financials as you can. For me, with an AdSense site, I want to get user level access to AdSense. I don't want just the screenshots from their AdSense account. I want to actually see their account live. If they won't give me user access, a screen share walkthrough would be pretty awesome to go on together, and then be able to direct them to the reports that maybe you want to see. You can have them print out reports, and if you're using a broker, that's trustworthy, that helps. But if you're doing peer-to-peer and you don't necessarily get that feeling of trust from them, then doing a screen share walkthrough or getting user level access is important. You definitely want to know what the price of the website is. I mean, that goes without saying. They may say, hey, I've got a website for you to look at, make me an offer. And that I guess wouldn't be unusual, but you'll want to be at some point developing an idea of what you would be willing, or what you think the site would be sold for. Now, here's the thing. People say, oh, what is my site worth? Well, ultimately your site is worth, the fair market value of what your site is worth is what somebody is willing to pay for it. Everything else is an estimate. If you have income of $500 a month, what somebody is willing to say that site is worth depends upon how they value it. Somebody will say, oh, well, my site is worth 25x of the monthly revenue. Well, that's great. That means somebody is willing to pay 25x for the site. But just, being really stuck on, oh, my site is worth $40,000, your site is only provably worth $40,000 if somebody is willing to give you money for it. I bought a site not too long ago for significantly less than what the seller was selling it for. And he didn't want to sell the site for that because he felt that his site was worth more. And I said, okay, that's cool. Let me know if you still want to sell it later. And he wasn't able to sell it and came back and sold it to me for what I wanted to pay for it. And ultimately at that point, the site was worth what I was willing to pay for it, not what it was that he wanted. So I'm just saying, the listing price of the website, you don't have to necessarily take that as truth as what the site is worth. That's just what somebody wants for it. But if somebody is unwilling to pay what it is that the site is listed for, it doesn't establish the site's worth, what somebody wants for it. What is the average monthly income over 12 months? That's a good statistic to know. Ultimately, I would like to know as far as possible in the past what the site has earned. If the site hasn't been earning for 18 months to 2 years, then for me, that means that I will just want to offer less for it. Because to me, I have less data to know how stable that it is. I definitely want to know the average monthly expenses over 12 months at least. And what is the average monthly net profit over 12 months? Of course, that goes without saying. For me, again, because I'm into AdSense, display advertising, content sites, I don't necessarily spend as much time going into the digging through the expenses because there shouldn't be that many. Ultimately, there shouldn't be tons and tons and tons. Somebody may, be buying content, maybe using VAs, maybe investing in backlinks or in guest posts or the rest. Like, I want to know those things. But for me, I understand and know once I take it over that I can handle, whatever maintenance the site needs. If you're looking at any sort of e-commerce store or SaaS or, some other site that is earning through services or products, you're going to want to dig into those really, really heavy because especially advertising and marketing, what it is people are investing to make that happen. Because if you just look at the spikes in traffic and you're just looking at the spikes or in the earnings and the revenue and you don't understand how that revenue is generated, you are setting yourself up potentially to be really sorry later on, buying something that you either don't know how to run or use or to make it happen. And this is especially the case if the traffic to the site and the sales to the site are being driven by a method that would require someone with a lot of expertise to do. Facebook ads, for example, isn't something you can just jump into and take over an account and then press play on. Like, you need to know what you're doing with Facebook ads. And the same is true for Google AdWords or Bing or the rest. Like, you don't just jump into that and do that well. And so if the site is being monetized in a way that it has to do with driving traffic through like expert methods, make sure that you are an expert in those methods or that you have somebody on board who can help you with that. And you can identify, with the expenses, whether or not those methods are being utilized. Now, if you're looking at the spikes and the expenses don't necessarily match up, those are flags. Like if you see a giant spike for the month of June and you don't see that it's coming from organic search traffic in analytics and the seller can't explain to you where that is coming from, you can suspect potentially that traffic is coming in through a source that they aren't telling you. Maybe they're buying traffic. Maybe they're doing something that they don't want you to know about to inflate the value of the site. And for me, that is cut the line, cut bait. I'm not interested if I can't explain where things are coming from and how and why. But the monthly expenses is a way to identify whether or not what they're telling you is legit. Let's see. So income, expenses, profit. Does the seller have any way of bringing income to the business outside of the website? For example, their own personal branding, network, or affiliation. This is actually fairly important, and I don't know if people think about this that much. For example, I was looking at the Shopify marketplace earlier this year because, I'm always trolling, I'm always looking, and there was a site that I was fairly interested in because I thought it was well priced and I thought that the listing was really good. And so I started engaging with the seller about it. And it was an e-commerce site that also came with a blog. And so there was traffic coming in through AdSense, and then also earnings coming in through AdSense, and then earnings coming in through physical products. And it was a print-on-demand store that was very niched down and had some really great products, I thought. And so in talking with the seller, we talked about her products, and she was like, oh, well, you'll get all of the products, all the designs, everything except for this one thing. And I was like, well, what is this one thing? And it was an ebook or a journal or something. And I said, oh, that's interesting. So let's talk about how much of your sales are associated with this one product. And she's like, oh, well, actually about 90%. I said, okay, so you're taking from this website the only product that's really earning a whole lot. She's like, oh, but you can, release new products that will take its place and you'll get the earnings back up right away. And I say, okay, well, that's good to know. So this one product, how are the sales being driven to this one product? And she's like, oh, through my podcast. And I say, okay, so your podcast is driving traffic to the site where people are buying your journal and presumably the other products. So are you going to leave the podcast with the site? She's like, well, no, the podcast is coming with me. And I say, okay, so the traffic is coming through the podcast and the sales are coming through this other book or journal, and probably people are buying, the shirts or the hats or whatever along with the journal. And I say, well, why won't you leave the podcast? And she's like, well, the podcast is about me. The podcast is about me and my journey and the rest. And I say, okay, so basically you're telling me that you are super awesome, which she was, and you are so super awesome that people listen to your podcast, and then after hearing you talk, they run away to your website, to your store, and buy all your stuff. She's like, well, yeah. And I say, and you're going to take you away from the website, and how much money do you think this site is going to be earning when you are not connected to it? And she's like, yeah. I said, yeah, the branding and the person and her persona and what she had to contribute to the site was everything. Without her, the site as an e-commerce store, was completely dead. It was completely dead. It wasn't getting organic search traffic, or very little. People were interested in her and in her products and her connection to them. Taking her away, selling the site, would leave the site completely dead. And so I passed, even though I thought that the site was really interesting and I thought that the niche had potential because it was unique and interesting. But without her, to me, it was dead in the water. I would never be able to step into her shoes because I didn't have her enthusiasm, her knowledge and background and expertise to make the site successful. So if you are looking at a site, look at it carefully to see how much of the seller is involved in it. Is the seller all over the site? Are the blog posts all about the seller? And are the people, do you think, following the site, going to the site because of the seller? And if the seller is unloading the site, are they going to be continue with the site and continue with that affiliation and with that? Like, think about it for like ClickFunnels, right? ClickFunnels is worth millions of dollars, and they have millions of dollars in sales, and people are like, oh, it's such a great page builder, and oh, it's great funnels and all this stuff. But honestly, anybody who's associated with the community knows that it has to do with Russell. Really, it's Russell. If Russell were to leave ClickFunnels, I can't guarantee you anything, but I have to tell you that I think that the brand would be drastically reduced in value. And I think a lot of people would jump ship and go to more affordable page builders that, deliver at least a similar user experience. People belong to that community because of Russell Brunson. They just do. And so you say, okay, well, is this site valuable, and is the traffic coming there because of one person? And what do you think will happen to the site when that person is no longer involved? Now, this for a content site, that is about dogs or about hiking, they may not have a strong connection to the person who's creating the content, or it may be something that is so informational rather than so, experiential that it won't matter if that person is no longer involved. But if the site is heavily focused on a particular person, like going back to Neil Patel, right? neilpatel.com. If Neil Patel were to leave neilpatel.com and sell that site to someone else who would then begin to run neilpatel.com, I mean, the old posts and the old pages and all the rest, so long as we could still leave Neil on them, would still continue to be valuable. But going forward, if Neil Patel was no longer creating content for the site and it was someone else, it was John Smith, who was then the SEO expert and doing the videos and the rest on all of these platforms, it's just not going to work as well. I just can't imagine how it would work as well. So this is something that I don't think people talk about very much, but the goodwill of the site, how valuable is the site without the people who are running it? Can the site continue without the creators or without the people who are currently involved in it? And if you don't think that the site could continue running without John Smith or without Neil Patel, it doesn't mean necessarily you shouldn't buy it. It just, for me, affects how much money and the website valuation for me. Now, if you are the potential seller of a site and you're looking at this and you're like, gosh, I would really love to sell my site, but it's all about me. What I would do then is to look at phasing me out of the site over time, getting a team of writers, or bring in a pen name or a ghostwriter or someone to take over that could be continued by some other website runner, that they could continue to post content under that ghostwriter pen name, and that ghostwriter could then continue with the site forever in perpetuity, and then we would build the brand around this pen name or this ghost person so that the site could be sold again in the future. Now, ultimately, when you've gathered all this information, before you go back to the site, you're going to want to develop sort of your own opinion about what the business is worth. For you, the business worth is what you are willing to pay for it. So you say, oh, well, I don't think it's worth $100,000, or I don't think it's worth $5,000, or the rest. I mean, again, this is all relative because it's going to be based upon your opinion about what it is that the site has, what its assets are, what its revenue is, what it is that you can do with it versus not. Does it have potential? And that may mean that you're willing to pay more for it. Like some people, you'd say, okay, well, a dead site, like a site that gets very little traffic, but the site is, 10 years old and has some content on it, and has good links to it, that site could potentially be revived fairly quickly with some good content, and that makes that site, to me, fairly valuable. I would be willing to pay more for it than some other sites. And so what I think it is worth has to do with the information that I take into it and how I translate that in my brain. All right, so this was Jared Krause's due diligence framework and sort of a talk through of that. I cannot believe I just talked for 47 minutes about this. I guess in the future I may go through and create a PDF of my own on this. If I'm not ready to do that now. However, if you are looking for a framework to use, I think this is a good place to start. And he's using it successfully in his business, and I think for that reason, it is something that is worthwhile using. If you got value out of this video, before you go, please do me the favor of clicking the like button or leaving a comment or something that will raise the profile of this video to other subscribers who are following this channel, and will help this video get seen by as many people as possible. And based upon the comments and questions that I have been getting lately, I think this is a video that a lot of people in our community need to see. So thank you so much for bearing with me for the last 48 minutes, and I'll catch you in the next one.